Hi, I'm Matt Knight. This tutorial forms part of the Stick It to the Man exhibition held in conjunction with the University of Plymouth. The tutorial will be split into three distinct sections: the hardware, the software and the performance. Firstly, when we're looking at the hardware, I'll show you all the components and the processes required to actually build your looping pedal. Secondly, I will introduce you to Max MSP, which is an audio software manipulation tool, and all of the important functions that are involved with the use of this program. And finally, we'll move on to how to perform with your actual looping pedal. So let's start by looking at the hardware. You're going to need just a handful of everyday household objects to produce this. The first being a USB interface of some kind. I chose to use a number keypad, which I no longer had any use for, which was in the bottom of a drawer collecting dust. Essentially though, you can use any keyboard for this project. You need to take the USB keyboard, like so, and what you really need to do is crack it open, or if you have some dream grandeur of maybe using this keyboard later in life, you might actually want to unscrew it, but for this sake I've cracked it open. What you basically need to do is get the USB chipset which is inside this component, and we need to place that inside our new housing box or a project box, which you can get from most electrical retailers. Now, as you can see, from the cracked covers now been removed, and inside we've got this chipset. This is the important part that we're going to need to retrieve from this unit. As you can see, the fascia will just, once you've unscrewed it, will just remove from the top like so. And inside there should be a matrix effectively of how this component would have normally worked. And you can see on here there is a grid system with various different points. When the keys on the keypad are pressed, they make a connection between each of these points, which sends a signal along the matrix back down to the USB chipset, which is on the bottom there.
The next step, once you've removed your USB chipset from its original housing unit, is to connect it to the buttons or switches you have chosen. Obviously the whole premise behind my original plan was to recycle where possible, so I've taken an old printer cable and cut it down to size. Next to the small white chip there are a collection of contact points. On a large number of chipsets, these will be coated in a conductive substance. You will need to carefully scrape this back to the shiny metal contact points below. It is then a case of soldering the printer cable to each one of the contact points, making sure not to allow the solder to flow across more than one of the contact points, as this will provide inaccurate outputs to your computer later on. I'm going to assume that you know how to solder. If you don't, I strongly advise getting help from someone who can, as you are dealing with electrical items and it can be potentially dangerous. Having successfully soldered the 10 or so wires to the contact points on your USB chip, you will need to test the outputs to see what is generated. If you have a contact strip with 10 terminals on it, you will logically be able to produce 5 pairs of wires. It's simply a case of plugging in the USB device to your computer and opening the test patch that comes with this tutorial. You will of course need to download the free trial version of Max MSP for the patch to run. On connection of 2 of the soldered wires, an output value should be produced. If it isn't, try a different pair. You simply need to find 5 pairs of wires that output a different value. Once you have done this, sellotape the pairs together so you know which ones make the pairs, and then systematically solder the pairs onto the positive and negative connectors of your buttons. Once you have done this, you are ready to go. Neatly put all the wiring into the case and then secure the lid using screws. So let's now take a look at the software for the looping pedal. I've elected to use Max MSP for the code. Now this was a difficult decision for me, as including a piece of software that was not freeware kind of runs against the overall theme of the show, Stick It to the Man. I looked at the freeware options available and none of them really came close to the potential of Max MSP. The other point to bear in mind is that the producers of this software, Cycling74, aren't a huge software giant like Microsoft. In fact, quite the opposite. They employ around 30 employees and are based in a small office in San Francisco. Now you can download a free trial version of their software from their website, cycling74.com, and a student license is only around £35 for the year. So for this reason I decided it wasn't a cardinal sin to use their software. Okay, so this is a patch that I've constructed myself using a few of the basic functions of Max MSP. I will explain the most important functions within this patch so that you can understand it, and hopefully will be able to make any modifications which you see fit. Very simply, the way that this patch works is it creates 4 slots within your memory on your computer. Now what it does is it allocates each one of those 4 slots a number, so that when you come later on to record a loop, it will record a section of sound to this place. You can overdub this at any time, and you can also delete it, but I'll show you how to do that later on in the performance. On the left hand side you can see the 4 red highlighted areas. They basically clear the tracks. Now before you obviously start going, you want to initialize all 4 of those, which you can do simply by clicking them. That will ensure that there's nothing saved in there from any previous usage of the pedal. The area which is highlighted at the moment effectively turns on all of the looping functions. You could go around and do this yourself. Evidently I would probably recommend just clicking that button. It is very vital to the code. If you don't switch that on, it won't loop your audio. It will simply play it through once and then it will cease to play any audio. Now the 4 highlighted components are effectively, I've linked these to my pedal. The way that I did this was to capture the code using the test pedal patch that is provided. Once this is done, you simply go into the back end of this code, which will become quite self-explanatory when you open it up. There's a small patch window. You replace the select function codes with the numbers that are output by your particular pedal. On mine, evidently, it's produced 35, 6, 8 and 10. All I need to do is input that into the select function, so that every time one of these buttons is pressed and effectively this code is then produced, it will then turn on one of the 4 buttons depending on which button I've pressed. So the final and probably the most important function of this code is the rather aptly named Magic Gateway. Now nothing will really happen on this code until this button is initialized. I might suggest that for one of your buttons, as I have done, you actually connect this to this code using your select function. Basically when this is clicked, all of your audio buffers will start looping, and you will be able to, depending on which of the 4 previous buttons you've selected, be recording onto each of those tracks. Thanks for watching this tutorial. Stick it to the man on audio looping. Any further questions or suggestions you have for either myself